chaos that ensued on January 6th. And we see law enforcement keep communities safe as we go about our daily lives. However, others, including Democrat lawmakers, are calling to defund the police. Here to talk about this further is senior researcher for the Policing Initiative at the Texas Public Policy Foundation and retired law enforcement officer Randy Peterson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You recently penned an op-ed for World Magazine highlighting that simply removing equipment from police to reduce police brutality does not solve the problem. As a retired law enforcement officer, what is the best way to go about this while ensuring officers have the means to protect themselves from a dangerous situation?
Removing the equipment is really not the issue. You know, some of these things have gotten a lot of negative attention from both sides of the aisle. You know, when you're seeing armored personnel carriers and things like that being used during riots. But in some of these situations, if you need one of those, there's really nothing else that will do. So taking that away can be dangerous. The idea of militarization of our law enforcement has been around for a while, but I think we equate that with equipment and the way officers look, and it's really about a mindset. We can prioritize life and look at the use of force rather than being the first line of problem solving and pushing it farther back and using de-escalation and things like that. But that takes training. But that's really more of the issue, is this militaristic mindset, which is a preference for force to solve any situation. And if we can avoid that, then the equipment doesn't have to go away, because sometimes it's really needed.
I want to list some statistics. So the Los Angeles Police Department tweeted some of those statistics this weekend, showing that homicides in South LA are up 150% compared to last year. We're also seeing the crime rate in New York increasing after the New York City Council voted to cut $1 billion from the NYPD's budget for the 2021 fiscal year. What do you say to those who want to defund police departments?
Well, I say take a look at what's happening, because they're giving us data to look at, right? That they have done the defunding, and these are the immediate results. I don't know that you can point to all of it being defunding, because a lot of that money gets taken away from training and other things. You know, the police departments are still going to try their best to protect the citizens through putting all of their efforts and resources that are left into core services. But when you look at New York, they got rid of their plainclothes unit that was responsible for a significant portion of their arrests, particularly their gun arrests. That was one of the first things that they cut, or that was cut by their defunding efforts. You know, all of these major cities that are doing this are giving the rest of the cities throughout the country a good reason to avoid this wrong-headed move of defunding the police.
As previously mentioned, you were an officer yourself, and now you're a senior researcher. From the outside looking in and vice versa, what is the biggest misconception you hear regarding law enforcement?
Well, a couple of things. The first thing is that I think every police officer really wishes that they wouldn't be collectively punished for something that goes wrong in one police department by one police officer. We don't do that in any other segment of society, and if we did, there would be rightful outrage, right? If we collectively punished a group for the sins of a single individual or a few. That's probably the first thing. The second thing that I would point out is that, contrary to the left's narrative, law enforcement is not a racist institution. Okay? It is absolutely not. If you look at the police subculture, it is probably the most colorblind segment of society, right? Police officers see each other as blue. They don't care if their brother or sister next to them is white, black, Hispanic, Asian. None of that matters. Sexual orientation doesn't matter to them. They see each other as one blue family. It might be refreshing if society saw themselves that way. So that it's the idea of them being called racist, as though that they have these biases against particular groups of individuals is incorrect.
You make some great points, and I think that's why we've been seeing more people carrying those flags, back the blue, defend the blue, the thin blue line. Lastly, I'd like to ask you, the Texas Public Policy Foundation will release what's called a white paper on its new training program at the end of the month and will encourage police departments to enforce it in the next year. Can you give us any insight on what you expect will be included?
Yes, one of the things that we are theorizing is that because all of the incidents that have gone viral that have caused unrest this last summer and cyclically throughout generations have all been around use of force. That's probably where we need to focus our attention. I mean, if we're looking at the common denominator of all of this, and that by making police officers more competent and more confident in their skills, they will have a greater sense of security in dealing with the public, which will allow them to lower their use of force decisions, right? An officer escalates force when they are in fear of receiving great bodily harm or death from an individual. They escalate to deadly force. Well, that threshold gets higher and higher the more skilled the officer is. If the officer is very skilled, they will use a lot of different options proportional to the threat that they see before they have to escalate. And that's what we're hoping to do is to change what is taught and how it's taught and the implementation of the training, the tempo of training, particularly in the basic police academy.
It'll be interesting to see what points they outline. Again, Randy Peterson, thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Meantime, the state of Texas prepares a handful of lawsuits against Joe Biden ahead of Inauguration Day.